Hey guys, how you going? My name is Dom, and in today's video we're going to be having a look at progressive web applications. Okay, so first off I want to show you what we're actually going to be creating in today's video. So let's go inside this tab right here. As we can see, I've got this very basic web page that is technically supposed to be an actual application if it had actual features. But as we can see here, in the top right, I have an option to install this application, and I can go ahead now and actually install that. And as we can see now, it's going to appear in a native window, and it looks like it's supposed to behave like a regular, native application. So that is the goal of today's video. Now, I can show you right now on screen what that looks like on other devices such as my Android phone. So as we can see, we've got the splash screen as well as the application running inside its window with no URL bar. Now, this application is also offline first, so if the network is down, we actually have cached some of our core static resources like HTML and CSS, so the application shell is available, and of course once the network comes back online, we can continue to use the application as per usual. So I do want to prove this right now, so I'm going to be going inside here. I'm going to inspect this. I'm going to go inside the network tab and just disable my network connection. I can now refresh and we can see the application is still working perfectly fine. Of course, if there was actual content, the content would not load, but of course the shell still remains. So let's go ahead now and take a look at one more thing before getting into the main contents of this video. So as we can see right here, I've got a few notes on PWAs. So from what I understand and what I've researched, people typically are going to consider an application as being a progressive web application if it meets the following criteria. So the first three here are actual requirements for installability. So the first one here is going to be the application must run over HTTPS, or for development purposes, it's going to also work on non-HTTPS local host. The second one here is going to be, needs to have a manifest.json file, and we're going to be creating one of these in today's video, and it just details how the application is going to look like by the end user. Okay, and the third one here is it needs to have a service worker. Now, for installability, the service worker must intercept fetch requests. So aside from that, it's also going to allow you to, of course, cache your resources and perform various different background tasks. However, I'm going to be covering the most basic form of an offline first application. We're going to be caching some of the static resources. Okay, but of course this area really deserves its own video because there is so much to talk about when it comes to service workers and different techniques for caching and making an offline first application. But like I said, I'm going to be covering the bare minimums. Okay, and the last point here is, just in general, your application should be responsive, smooth, and app-like. You want smooth animations, you want everything to behave like a native application. Okay, and the very last point here is, a good PWA, needs to be able to run while offline by caching core assets. Once again, that way it behaves like a regular native application. Okay, so let's go inside this tab right here and begin from scratch to create what I just showed you previously. Okay, so I'll just refresh this, and now I do have a bunch of source code here that is bare minimum. It does not contain any of our manifest.json, our service worker. So I'll be leaving a link to this code right here in the description below for you to download yourself and get started. But there isn't too much going on at all. I've got this linked CSS style sheet with a single rule set, so very straightforward, and the index.js file is currently empty. Okay, and I've also got here two logos. I've got a 192 by 192 version of my logo, and I have a 512 by 512 version of my logo. Okay, so let's get started with the first step of installability, and that is going to be creating the manifest.json file. So let's go inside here and make a new file called manifest.json. Okay, and inside here we're going to be specifying a few properties, like I said earlier, to describe how the app is going to look like on the end user's device. So every single operating system is going to be interpreting these values differently, but for the most part it's probably going to be very similar or the same. So the first one here is the name property. So this right here is meant to be the full name of your application. So we can say right here, for example, dcode PWA example. We can make a second property here, and this one's going to be called short name. Now, in many cases, if your application name is short enough, these two can remain the same, but once again, it's up to the operating system how they're going to use your name. Maybe in things like app launches, or on the home screen, it might be using the short name, but like I said, it's up to the operating system. Okay. The third one here is going to be the start URL, and this basically just defines, how your application is going to start. So where is it going to start? So in my case here, I'm going to be putting a dot. That way, when the user opens the application, okay, it's going to go to the document root right here, /PWA. If of course you're serving from just the root of your host name here, then it's going to be, just that and nothing else. So in my case, I'm going to be putting a dot. That way we go to PWA. Okay, cool. The third one here, the fourth one is going to be the background color. And this one is going to define the background color of the actual splash screen. Okay, so I'll show you the example once again of the Android device here. So as we can see, I've got that light green background. So we can specify this by saying hash and then 6D, CD, and then B1. Okay, cool. The next one here is going to be the theme color. And for this one, this is going to appear, I believe, in the status bar, I think that's what it's called, of your devices. In the case of Windows, it appears in the actual title bar like we saw earlier. So for this case, I'm going to be putting the 009578, my decode green color. I'll be showing you once again on the screen here what it looks like on an Android device. Okay, cool. Let's now save this and then go back inside the HTML and just link up our manifest.json. So back inside here, let's make a new link within the header for rel manifest and put inside here manifest.json. So now if I save this and refresh the page here, go inside the application tab and then go to the manifest section, we can see here that we have the manifest picked up by Chrome. Okay, so if you want to access the dev tools, just press F12 or inspect element and you'll get there. But as we can see here, it has picked up the manifest.json and we have the name, short name, the theme color, things like that. So that's working. If you don't get this to display, make sure your URLs are correct or try and figure out why it's not displaying. Okay, cool. So now we can move on with a few more properties. One of them here is going to be the display property, and this one just tells the operating system how it should display the actual your application. So in this case here, I'm going to be saying stand alone. Okay, now here there are many different properties values you can put inside here. For example, minimal UI or full screen. Now standalone is probably going to be your most preferred choice. That's because it's going to hide the actual URL bar at the top, and it's going to still make your application feel native, while also keeping your theme color, which is specified up here. So standalone is probably the most common choice for this and probably the most preferred option. Okay, cool. We can also go down here and we can specify an icons property, and this one's going to be a list of icons used by the application. So here we can pass through an array. I'm going to be specifying both of my my 192 logo and my 512 logo. Okay, so we can say here source, and we can say images / logo 192.png, and we can also say down here sizes, specifying the actual size of the image. So we can say 192 by 192, it's a square image, and we can say also here type and make this image /png. Now we can do the exact same thing for the second logo here. We can just say 512 for each one of these. Okay, and that is all for our manifest.json file. So now let's save this and refresh once again. Inside here, we can see that we have the logos obviously loaded up perfectly fine, and of course here we get display standalone. Okay, now we need to do a few more things, and that is, first off, we need to specify a theme color inside the head of the actual HTML. So let's go inside here and make a new meta with a name of theme-color, and the content of this is going to be hash and then 009 and then 578. So use the same color which you used inside the manifest.json right up here. We also need to specify an Apple Touch icon. So let's go down here and say link for touch. So rel Apple Touch icon, and make this your 192 image or your 180 image if you have one of those. So we can say here images /192.png. We can now save this right here and then refresh the page, go inside the actual audits tab here, and then uncheck all these options aside from progressive web app. Okay, generate the report in Chrome obviously, and we can see it's going to run an audit on your application. So it's going to run through the manifest.json file and let you know if anything's wrong. So as we can see right here, we have different categories. Let's ignore these two for now, as well as this one down here. But as we can see, the web app manifest meets the installability requirements, so we are good to move on to the service worker part of this video. But if you see anything wrong here, make sure you go inside here and try and figure out what needs to change in order for you to receive green ticks all around for each one of these dot points. Okay, cool. So now we are done with the manifest.json. We can move on to writing the service worker. Okay, so moving on to the service worker, that is the last step in order to make our application installable. Okay, so let's go back inside the text editor and have a look at the index.js file. So we're going to be putting the following code inside here. Okay, we're going to be saying if service worker in navigator. Okay, so this right here just checks if service workers are supported by the web browser. If they are, we're going to be, of course, using them. If not, unfortunately, you might want to say else and then just say something like, application not supported or something along those lines. Okay, so once we know we can actually use service workers, we're going to be saying right here, navigator.serviceworker.register. Okay, and then pass through here the URL for the service worker. So let's put inside here sw.js. We have not yet created this file, but we're going to be creating it very soon. We can then say .then, and then here we're going to have a registration object. So we can just say registration inside here, and then we can just say console.log sw registered. Okay. Then we can also just log out the registration object if you want to take a look at that. Now, I forgot to mention that service workers are going to be using promises quite often. So you want to make sure you understand promises at least at a basic level before trying to learn service workers. I have a whole video on promises if you want to check that out before continuing to watch this video, but just make sure you understand promises before moving forward. Okay, so this right here is going to, of course, say, service worker registered if they were successful. If it was not successful, then we can just say catch and go inside here and say error. Then we can simply just say console.log console.log, SW registration failed. Okay, then we can just say console.log and log out the actual error. Okay, so now let's save this and refresh the page. Go inside the console, and we can see here we get SW registration failed because, of course, we don't have the actual script ready just yet. So let's go back inside here, and we're going to be creating the sw.js file. So you do want to create this file right here in the root of your application. If you create this file inside the source directory, it can only be used within that scope. Okay, so for example, if you want to use a service worker to cache your images, for example here, because the service worker would be inside this directory, it can't intercept the requests for this directory. So make sure you put it outside in the application root. Okay, cool. So now we have that sorted. We can go inside here now in the service worker, and we can say self.addEventListener, and we're going to be passing through here install. Okay, we're then going to grab the event object, and now we're going to simply say console.log and say install. Okay, so this right here is going to fire off whenever the service worker is being installed. Okay, so just keep in mind that service workers only get installed once in their life cycle. Okay, so once you actually load this and it registers the service worker, it is going to install, but once you refresh, it is not going to install a second time. Okay, so let's save this right here and then refresh the page. As we can see here, we get SW registered. We have the registration object, okay, and the scope is set to our PWA. Okay, now we also have here, of course, install. Now, like I said, if I refresh this, we can see the install is now gone. It did not execute this right here twice. Okay, so it's in the install phase right here where we want to actually cache our resources. So like I said earlier, we're going to be caching our static resources like CSS, images, and the index HTML file. Okay, so inside here, let's cache those resources for future use. Now, I want to mention also, if you make any changes to your sw.js file, then it needs to be reloaded. So I'm going to show you right now. If I was to say console log and say install then dcode, for example, let's save this and then refresh the page. As we can see here, we get install dcode right there. We made a change to the service worker.js file. Now, if you go inside the application tab here once again, go to the service workers section, you can see right here we have 2 service workers in this list. This 3351 is the service worker that is running for our previous change before I made this change to install dcode. Okay, however, this one right here, this version was actually ran and only the install step ran. So we get install dcode in the console. It is not yet activated. If you want to make sure that your fetch requests, which we're going to be seeing very shortly, if you want to make sure your service worker is actually running, okay, and activated for this page right now, you need to say skip waiting. So now our second service worker, anything we do from this point onwards is going to be used by the application. So we're going to be seeing this in action very shortly, but just keep that in mind. If you see any problems, just make sure you go inside here and press stop waiting. Okay, cool. So now, let's go back inside here and cache our resources. So inside here, we're going to be grabbing the event object, and we're going to be saying e.waitUntil, and this function right here is going to take in a promise. So let's go inside here, and we're going to be saying caches.open, okay, passing through here our cache name of static. So we're going to be opening up a cache called static. If this cache does not exist, which currently of course it does not exist, it is going to be created. We can use it. So we're going to be saying .then. So now we have the cache object, just like that. Okay, so we've opened up a cache called static, which will contain our cached static resources. Okay, you can of course name this whatever you want. You can call it dcode, you can call it keyboard, whatever you want, but static is an appropriate name. Okay, then we're going to be saying return cache.addAll and passing through here a list of assets. So we can say here as an array, our // so of course our document root, our index HTML file. Okay, second one is going to be our source master.css. Okay, third one is going to be let's just do one image, so images and then logo 192.png. Now, of course, in your own application, these are going to change. This right here is just a basic example for you to get started. Okay, so essentially, the service worker now is not going to be considered to be installed until this promise inside here settles. Okay, so once everything has been cached, then the service worker is going to be installed. So let's demonstrate this right now. I'm going to save this and then refresh the browser. As we can see, we have the old service worker, the new one just came through and it was installed. It is now waiting to activate. This is proven. If we go inside the cache storage, we can see we get static right here. If we go inside here, we get a list of all our resources. So we can see here for the first one, the HTML, it's got the response, so we can preview it, and it's the HTML. Same goes for the logo and the CSS. So we have officially cached our resources. Okay, so now it's time to put them to use when actually trying to retrieve each one of these resources. So let's go back inside here, and we're going to be adding here a second event listener. We're going to be saying self.addEventListener, listen for the fetch event, and this one going to once again accept the event parameter. Okay, and for this one, this is basically going to run whenever we have a fetch request. Okay, so we can say here, for example, console.log. We can say intercepting fetch request for, then pass through here e.request.url. I'm obviously using the template strings here, and the event object contains a request, so we're just simply printing out the URL of that request. Okay, so let's save this and then refresh the page. Okay, once again our service worker is stayed at 3352. Let's skip waiting and activate the version which intercepts our fetch requests. Okay, let's activate that, skip waiting. Okay, and now if I refresh, we can see right here we get intercepting fetch request for CSS file, the JS file, the manifest.json, and of course the logo 192.png. Okay, and now that we've actually, we have an event listener for the fetch request, it means that the application can now be installed. Okay, so that's obviously a benefit for having the actual fetch event listener on the service worker. So now we have intercepted the request. We can now try to look at the cache and try to return the cached version of the resource before falling back to the network. So, okay, let's go inside here. We're going to be saying this. We're going to be saying e.respondWith. Okay, this one also takes through a promise. Okay, so here we're going to be saying caches.match, and then pass through here e.request. So we're going to be passing through the request of the actual fetch call. Okay, and then we're going to be saying .then, and now we're going to have a response inside here. Okay, so it's going to look at the cache and try and find a matching request if it was cached up here, so the CSS file, the PNG file, or the index.html. Okay, this response is going to be, it's going to contain a response. If not, it's going to be undefined. So go inside here and we say return response or fetch and then e.request. So right here, like I said, we're saying if we've found the response in the cache from up here, then we're going to return that response and be done with it. There was no need to go to the network for that particular scenario. Otherwise, if this is undefined and we don't actually have a cached version of the resource, then we're going to say or and then fall back to the network to get the response. So doing a regular fetch request. Okay, so cache first. If that's not there, then go to the network. Okay, so now if I save this and refresh, remember to actually, activate your service worker. So go inside here and just skip waiting. Okay, then refresh once again, and now in the network tab, we can see right here we have a few changes. Okay, so having a look at PWA, we can see right here every request comes from the service worker. Now, for PWA, master.css and logo192.png, for those three cached resources, we can see there is no duplicate requests. That is because what's happened here, for index.js for example, we didn't cache this one. So it's tried to get it, but then the service worker has made the actual request for the network resource. We can further prove this by going offline, okay? Then refreshing, we can see first off, of course, the page still works, okay? But also our PWA has came back successfully and the master CSS has came back successfully because they were, of course, cached inside here, application, and then cache storage, static. Of course, those three are right there. Okay, so let's go back inside here now and make this once again online. Refresh, and now we can install the application and we can see it's working perfectly fine. So that right there is how to create, or that's sort of getting started and giving you a foundation for creating a progressive web application. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.